Welcome to Prepping for the Studio. If you're a musician or musical artist that wants to learn more about what goes on, how to prepare, or how to make the most out of your studio session, you're in the right place.
Prepping for the studio.
Episode 5. Roy and Brian discuss important preparations you should make before your tracking session, such as practicing and how to practice in a way that best gets you ready for the actual session. They discuss the need to memorize your parts and making sure your instruments are in good shape. Also, what are some things you should never forget to bring to the studio? Thanks for joining. Hello. Welcome back to Prepping for the Studio. I'm your host, or co-host, should I say, Roy Silverstein. I'm joined by Brian Schubel.
Hello.
Hi, Brian. How you doing?
Pretty good.
Excellent. Well, another episode 5 now, of Prepping for the Studio, the podcast for musicians who want to know more about the recording studio and how it works and how to prepare and make the most out of your money and time. So, yeah, we talked about all kinds of stuff last time related to picking a studio, picking an engineer, and it's time to go along further into the tracking process. But before you actually get in the studio, there's some preparations that one must make. So we're going to be talking about mostly that on this episode. And of course, it starts with practice, right?
Yeah.
So you come in ready to do the thing.
Yeah, the thing.
Instead of, to do the thing. Instead of trying to remember how the part goes or fumbling through the part because you don't have it. Or as a band, you're not playing together or that kind of thing, you know?
Yeah. Especially if you're doing more than, a few songs. You have to run through them all. Make sure you have your head straight on what part you're doing for each song.
Yeah. And this will also save your engineer a lot of headache because probably one of my least favorite parts of engineering is like just doing take after take after take because the band or the person can't get it. You know?
Yeah.
It's a waste of time for everybody and a waste of your money.
Yeah.
So it is very important that you actually put in the time to practice.
Yeah.
And you want to have the practice kind of mimic the experience you're expecting in the studio to have, like the way you're going to track it, basically. So if you're going to use a click track, practice with the click track so you get used to that.
Yeah.
It's a weird thing with click tracks. If the drummer especially has never played to one, we may have touched on this before, but it can be tricky. It's hard to stay right on the click.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And it can distract you. And then you can, when you're right on it, you kind of cover it, like with the kick and snare hits and stuff like that. And so then you can be like, wait, where did the click go? It's actually like, hey man, you're killing it. Like you're on it. You're so on the click that you're masking it.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a tricky thing to do and take some practice, which is why you should practice with the click. And, clicks can make you play very robotically possibly, and that might not be what you want. So you might need to sort of have your drummer practice to playing with the click, but being a little behind or ahead. And I mean, you know what I mean? Like it's tricky.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It doesn't mean you can't speed up on a fill going into the chorus or lay back when you drop into a verse. You still want to have some human feel. And
yeah.
I don't think anybody that's going to be playing to a click is going to be dead on anyway, because it's very, very difficult.
Yeah.
So you're going to have some ebb and flow with your tempo playing to the click. I think that's a common thing I hear. Not maybe 25-30% of the guys are like, I don't want the click to screw up my feel and all that. But I think really what it does, it's a great tool to help you use your feel, but straighten your feel out a little bit. Not straighten your feel out, I don't mean that, but to get your clock internally better.
Right.
I mean, if you're playing the same song every day on the road with a click track, but you take the click away, say after 4 weeks of doing that, you're going to be pretty darn good.
Yeah, I bet.
I think.
One little thing I saw an engineer doing here once when a band was trying to play with the click and they weren't getting it. It was interesting. He like had them play with the click and then he muted the click and then brought it back to see if they were still there on it.
That's awesome.
Which could be a good exercise to try.
Yeah.
To see if you're capable of doing that and still being on, or close, you know.
Yeah, something else I'll do if the guy's having a really hard time playing with the click, and that includes the band sometimes too, although the band should be following the drummer, is turn the click off, say at the chorus or after the first chorus, turn it off and let the rest be you guys.
Okay.
You know.
Yeah. A lot of times you need to turn it off at the very end of the song because you might do a little retard, slow down or whatever.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Or there's just like the last note and then it rings out and there's click coming through the headphones and sometimes it gets into the mics if it's too loud, you know?
Yeah.
But if the engineer turns off the click right at the end, then you don't hear that click bleed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or if the acoustic guitar player has a click too loud.
Yeah, that is a common problem in general. It's click bleed.
Yeah.
So you want to try to get it so you get the click in there, but not super loud.
Yeah.
Which can be tricky for drummers. Which is, maybe you want to use in-ear monitors or those isolating headphones. I have some of those. They don't sound that great, but maybe some of the other newer ones might sound better. I don't know. Because those kind of keep it from getting out.
Yeah. They look like the ones that they have at the airport, right?
Yeah.
These guys.
Yeah. They
waving
like
in the planes.
Earmuffs, basically. Yeah. But yeah, they do help keep the sound in. But yeah, the in-ears are pretty good too, I think. Yeah, because
they seem to be pretty popular now.
Yeah. Yeah, they've gotten better sounding and all that. But besides the click, practicing with the instruments you plan to track together would make sense. If you're planning doing drums and bass together, have the drummer and bass player play together, just them two, if that's all that's going to be happening, or if it's going to be guitar and drums or the whole band or whatever it's going to be, practice that way. So you get used to that. And once you get in the studio, that will help you it be exactly like how you practiced it, and it'll feel normal.
Yeah, it'll save time. And if you're a guitar player, it might be good for you to have your tone dialed in. Make sure you kind of have it where it feels good, or your pedal, whichever pedal you want.
Yeah.
So you're not searching for sounds in the studio or asking the engineer, hey, can you get a tone on my guitar? You don't want to do that.
Yeah, yeah. Hopefully you have an idea of what you want out of your tone and you have it figured out on your amp. You might need to tweak it still. Or the engineer might say, oh, it's a little brighter. That kind of thing can happen, but at least you have a good starting point.
Yeah. I mean, when I say you don't want the engineer to do it, what I'm basically saying is it's your guitar, it's your sound, you're the player on the song. If you can dial in a tone that feels good to you and the band, go with that. Yeah. Whereas the engineer, you may not know what he's going to go for, and he might go for something that doesn't apply for you or work, whatever.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely, it's your record and you want it to sound the way you want it to sound. So it starts at the source, right? We always go back to that. It's like, you want it to sound right. Well, make it sound right at the source. So if you're a guitar player, that's your guitar and your amp. If you're a drummer, it's your drums and the way you tune it. And, if it's a singer, then it's the way you sing. Speaking of singing, it's helpful as a vocalist if you memorize the lyrics, I think, as opposed to, here I am with a piece of paper right now. First of all, if you're holding a piece of paper, the ruffle sound, you hear that?
Put it in front of your mouth.
Yeah.
And talk.
Yeah. And then this. Yeah. And it's also just like your brain power of like reading the page of the lyrics and singing.
Yeah.
You don't realize it, but you're distracted. Now you're not focused 100% on your performance.
Yeah.
And so you can't put it on as much nuance, I don't think. If you internalize the lyrics, then you can kind of feel the meaning of the song more and you can really emote it,
Yeah.
Some people use their phones. They have the lyrics on the phones, They're holding their phone up in front of them, which is awkward, and your arm gets tired.
Yeah.
And phones put out weird RF emissions, and some microphones pick those up. I've had that happen.
Yeah.
So that can be a problem. And
also you can get slapped back from the music stand if you have a music stand right behind the mic.
Yeah, music stands near the mic can cause a little reflection. Better if you don't have those around.
Or off to the side.
Have them off to the side, put something soft on them. And that's better.
Yeah, you're going to have a lot of stuff to deal with when you go in to do your vocals. And, you have people looking at you. You're in a new place. It's best if you have them memorized. And then you can get, one of the common things I would say to a singer is get inside the song. You sound like you're just singing. You don't sound like you're in the song.
Yes. You want to believe, what you're singing. And the person listening needs to think that it's real, that you're really meaning what you're saying. You know what I mean? And it can come across as like you're just going through the motions if you're like reading off a page,
Yeah. Like you said, bring out the emotion,
Right. Like I could sit here and read my ebook to you, which if I didn't mention, it's at preppingforthestudio.com, the ebook that this whole podcast is based off. But yeah, that would be boring and you probably would just turn this whole podcast off because it's
books on tape.
Yeah. And we could do that, but yeah, this is more interesting having a conversation about it. So yeah, I mean, the same thing kind of applies towards any instrument, If you internalize the part, if you're a guitar player, if you're a bass player, you can play with more nuance, you can play with more feel, as opposed to like, if you're the type of musician who does write out their parts or something, and you're sight reading,
Yeah, it's true.
It seems a lot harder to me. I don't know. I don't even know how to do that. But I learned music when I was middle school, I think. But I've just kind of let that muscle deteriorate. So,
same here.
But I mean, I know like classical players probably always have their sheet music in front of them and so forth. And sometimes it's good to have for reference, and some people really need that. But if you can internalize it, just like with a vocalist, I think you'll be able to play with more nuance and emotion and all that.
Totally.
How much should you practice? I don't know. I mean, this is the one thing I'll say is just like if you're taking a test at school, like cramming for the test is never really a great way to study for the test the night before,
Yeah.
Better to spread out your practices probably over several weeks before the studio time and don't like the day of like practice it a bunch. Like I think you'd rather be fresh on the day of and like bring fresh energy instead of like, we just came from the practice studio and we did it 50 times and now we're going to do it in the studio. Like you're probably gonna be a little stale at that point about the song, you're just sick of it.
Yeah. It's kind of like sports too, those guys like in the NBA, they're shooting threes over and over and over and over on their days off, and they're doing drills. They're really working out. And I know the one thing that as an athlete, when I used to run cross country and track and all those things, but a lot of times we would work really hard through the week before a match, and then we'd take the day before off or just have it a light day. So
right,
sometimes that would help and make it, you have this abundance of energy on the race day.
You want to come into the studio with that kind of energy, well rested, prepared, like we were talking about, but not tired because you were up super late overdoing it.
Yeah.
And not sick of what you're about to do because you just did it too much.
Yeah. You're arguing with the bass player.
Yeah. So you want to come in with that fresh energy. And that's why sometimes like the first takes are the best, because it's like, that's the freshest energy.
Yeah. Totally.
And people are just going for it and not overthinking it and that sort of thing.
Yeah. Oh, I just thought of something when we were talking about the click,
Yeah.
The other thing is think about tempo for the song. You probably already have that sort of in your...
That's part of the pre-production. I think we talked about that.
Yeah. So you say, okay, the tempo's 110 on this, and you get in the studio and you set it to 110, you're ready.
Yep. Totally. Yeah. Tempo is key. Even like 1 beat per minute difference, can make it feel right or wrong. So that's, in the pre-production stage, something you play with until it feels right, and then but make sure that, we'll talk about this later, that you have that information with you when you come to the studio and you haven't forgotten it.
Yeah.
What's the tempo? I don't remember. Oh, let me look up the demo, or, it's like a wasted time again.
Yeah, that's the thing you could do also is give people certain jobs. Like the drummer could be in charge of bringing in the tempo, or you know, and of course all his instrument things he has to take care of. But then the bass player could be the guy to make sure everybody has their cables, or
right,
whatever. I'm just
yeah. Well, let's get into this because that's kind of the next section is prepping for your instruments. Right, you wouldn't the analogy I give in the ebook is would a Formula One race car driver show up with their car in questionable condition the day of the race? No, they're gonna make sure that car is all working totally 100%. So it's the same thing with your instruments in the studio. Like ideally, you come in knowing that your guitar or your bass or your amps or whatever is all working really well. So, so for guitars and basses, acoustic or electric, really, they might need like what's called a setup. You might need to go to a guitar tech who you trust and have them go through the instrument, and they tweak certain things, the truss rod and saddles and these kind of things to make the instrument play well all throughout the whole neck of the instrument. So it's in tune.
Your intonation
is so key.
No buzz in the frets.
Fret buzz. So the whole height of the string off of the neck and that kind of thing, they can adjust that and make it so you're not getting crazy buzz, the string buzzing against the frets.
Yeah, and that would be something I wouldn't do it the day before. I would do it a couple of weeks so that you're playing it. And so if he does change a lot, you can get used to that feel.
Good point. Yeah, it might change the feel. And you may, if you did it the day before, you might get it back and be like, it still has a problem, or you know what I mean? Their texts are not always perfect. Yeah, definitely something you could do a week or two ahead of time. But intonation is so important because have you had this problem before, Brian? Like of the guitar player that goes up the neck and then it's out of tune?
Yeah, many times.
Yeah, it's a big pain in the butt.
Yeah, because the only way around is you tune for that certain part of the song, and then you're having to punch in or play those parts in a different tuning.
Right. That's basically the solution. It's like chopping up the song so you can play the parts separately so you can tune it for the issue.
Or you get another guitar.
Yes. Which will be a different sound and you're not going to be used to it and all that kind of stuff. It'll save you some serious headaches if you get your guitar set up properly.
Yeah.
So also there's electronics on a lot of, obviously on electric instruments, there's the pickups, there's the switches, there's the pots. Those can be dirty. There can be wiring issues. There can be shielding and grounding issues that can cause buzzes and hums. So, if you're experiencing that, definitely get that stuff fixed.
Pedal boards.
Yes. All of your pedals and all of your little cables that go between the pedals and your longer cables that go between your guitar and your pedals and all that, like make sure all those cables are fine. There's little cable testers you can get that are not too expensive, where if you're not sure, you can put them in this cable tester and it tells you if the connections are proper, and you kind of wiggle them around and you make sure they're not intermittent or anything like that. So you want to make sure you come in with all your cables working well and all the switches and the pots on your guitar, are not scratchy and that kind of thing.
Yeah. Adapters. One of the things I kind of nowadays I suggest more than ever is if you have headphones that you really like, bring them, and make sure you have the right adapter so that you can use your own headphones.
Yeah.
In the studio. Most studios have headphones and you're fine, but I lately I've been telling people, because a lot of people like to use their earbuds or
yeah, whatever headphones that you like, that probably better than anything else, as long as they're closed back for tracking. So, meaning they're totally sealed up on the back. Otherwise, they'll make too much noise into them. The mics, you get the click bleed and all that stuff.
Yeah.
And then you would make sure their headphones are working, I suppose, and sounding right if you're bringing them while we're talking about that. But yeah, the guitar stuff, buzzes and stuff, it's such a problem. And it's so variable, like in my experience with working with guitar players, as to how much hum and buzz is in their rigs.
Yeah.
Like I have some people come in and it's really quiet. And then other people, it's like so loud, all the buzz and hum.
Yeah.
And a lot of it comes down to the pickups, I think.
Single coil.
Yeah. Because pickups are basically antennas. That's what they do is they pick up this electromagnetic kind of vibration. So they pick up all the electromagnetic energy also in the room, and there can be a lot in a studio from all the equipment.
Mm-hmm.
All the equipment like radiates, especially the 60 cycle hum stuff, and that then you hear it as harmonics of that too. If you can afford it and have a good guitar tech, one thing that would be cool is having the pickup cavity can be shielded inside with like copper tape and having that copper tape grounded.
Mm-hmm.
That can help like reduce the amount of energy getting to the pickups. Because yeah, it seems like it comes down to the pickups a lot of times as far as how much buzz
there
is.
Yeah, I worked at a studio once. It was Cherokee Studios, but we were on a session, and back in those days, you were there for 6 weeks or 2 months. And all the guitar players, there was so much buzz. We don't know if it was in the neighborhood or whatever, but they built this, I don't know, 10-foot by 10-foot box with steel on the inside.
Mm-hmm.
It was hilarious, and it worked.
That's great.
But it was funny just seeing.
Yeah, what a pain in the ass, though.
Yeah,
I kind of tried to do something like that because I was getting a lot of problems for a while, but it didn't work out for me.
No, really.
I tried to like basically take those like Japanese folding screens.
Oh yeah,
and cover them in copper tape.
That's great.
And like create a little like thing around somebody and like ground that copper tape. And I even put like a thing on top that was like a copper netting.
Oh wow.
Yeah, but it didn't really help.
Not at all.
No, I don't think it helped at all.
Wow.
So, but maybe the Cherokee, they really did it right with like.
It was pretty funny, but we because I was a staff guy there for so long, we knew we had a problem just in the grounding somewhere.
Yeah,
and the idea was that it was a transformer outside the building that was somehow getting into the studio.
Yeah, some studios are not wired right. I think I go into it more. There's some tricks that you can try to reduce these buzzes, but. So then there's your amplifier though too.
Yeah.
So is the amp sounding okay? Like if the amp is already making a crazy noise, buzz, something without even plugging into it, you know you got a problem.
Yeah.
So it should be pretty dang quiet, just turning it on and nothing plugged in.
Yeah.
The other thing that happens is there can be vibrational noises once you start playing and the speaker starts moving and other parts of the amp start vibrating.
Oh, right. Yeah.
That happens a lot.
Yeah.
Or something is vibrating, so something needs to be tightened.
A tube.
The tubes can vibrate and make weird sounds. The whole cabinet can resonate. You know, if you're able to get rid of that stuff, you're going to get a better sound.
If it's on wheels, sometimes that can cause it. It might move 2 inches after you finish your take.
Yeah. Amp stands are kind of cool. I try to use them when I can. So it's a little stand to you put your amp on so it's off the ground.
Oh, that's great.
Not all amps will accommodate, the one I have at least. But that's a cool thing because it also reduces the reflections of sound coming off the ground and back into the mic.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. So you might want to get an amp stand and it will decouple it from the floor and that stuff.
Yeah.
And yeah, we already mentioned your cables and your pedals, cable testers, all that stuff. Sometimes it's just one pedal can be the bad pedal. I've seen that happen. Where they have a whole big pedal board with a bunch of pedals and there's some weird noise. You can't figure out where it's coming from. We just start eliminating pedals. And it just turns out like this one pedal is noisy, you know?
Yeah.
Why? I don't know.
Yeah.
Sometimes you need to run off battery instead of the wall wart.
Yeah.
That can work better because the battery is kind of its self-contained little power.
Yeah. And if you're going to go through your pedal board and you're only using one pedal, maybe you might want to just pull the pedal out and just go through the one pedal instead of going through 5.
Yeah.
Even though,
you'll have less noise. You'll have a cleaner signal. So yeah, that's a good general rule is just use the pedals that you need for the song and get rid of all the other ones.
Yeah. And tuners, make sure you bring tuners or one tuner or your phone has a tuner.
Yes.
That's reliable.
I have a section about accessories you're going to need to remember. But let's talk about strings, which you should also have backup strings. But whether or not you should put new strings on and when, it's kind of something you should talk with your producer or engineer about, I think. Because personally, I hate the sound of brand new strings.
Yeah.
They're too bright. They sound almost like they're buzzing.
Yeah.
Some people insist on them, though. Other engineers will say, you should put new strings on right away, you know? So a conversation you would have with them.
You know, one of the things I really appreciate with guitar players is when you're tracking a song I want to say rewinding to do another take. You're getting ready to, and you see the guitar player out there and maybe the bass player, they're checking their tuning constantly. That's what I love.
Yes.
And it's very important, especially because you brought up new strings. If you have new strings on, you're going to need to check the tuning after every take, or actually maybe after a couple of chords, because they're just breaking in. Same thing with drum heads,
Yeah. Brand new strings definitely go out of tune a lot more than ones that have been been on this guitar for a long time or for a week. I think that's, to me, it's like the week or 2 weeks is a good time to have the strings on there, so they're not like too old, and play it. You put them on a week or two in advance, and you play the guitar a bunch. And then they settle in to the guitar, and they don't sound too bright, but they're not too dull either.
Yeah, but check your tuning constantly.
Yeah.
So it'd be nice to have a tuner of some sort nearby.
Right. There's the clip-on type.
Yeah.
Or there's the pedal types. I would say if everyone in the band can use the same tuner or the same model,
I agree.
Probably better.
Yeah.
Because they do have weird small differences in what they consider to be an A or an E. You know what I mean?
Yep. I agree.
So everyone in the band use the same, at least model tuner, if not the exact same tuner.
Yeah. Back when the Boss tuner was the one, I used to always say, just use one tuner, everybody. Use the same tuner. Because of the differences.
I mean, that would be the ultimate. Use the literally the same tuner for everybody.
Yeah, or the strobe guy.
Yes, there's the strobe ones, I guess, are the most kind of accurate, really. Some people don't know how they work, but they're not that complicated.
There's an app that's the strobe.
Wow.
I actually have it. It's pretty cool.
It works pretty well. Peterson?
Yes,
that's the company that does those.
Yeah,
I got the pedal version.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's guitar stuff and bass stuff. And now, a word from our sponsor,
Rarefied Recording.
Oh, that's me. I would be remiss if I didn't mention my studio, Rarefied Recording, and the services I offer there. The studio itself was built from the ground up, from the masterful plans of Mr. Wes Lachaux, so it sounds fantastic both in the control room and the live room. A 32-channel Neve Genesis console holds center court and is complemented by a wide array of outboard gear, instruments, and microphones. Your music will be in good company. If you live in the San Diego area, just head on over to rarefiedrecording.com to learn more and book a tour. You can also hear examples of my tracking and mixing work. If you aren't lucky enough to live in San Diego, let me be the first to suggest the idea of a destination recording experience. San Diego is BBB approved.
The Better Business Bureau?
No, beaches, burritos, and beer. Even if you're not a beach person, who's to complain with temperatures that are very often in the 70s? Even the winter months are averaging in the mid-60s. And being relatively dry, rain is unlikely to get in your way. The studio is very centrally located, and you can get to just about anywhere in the area in 15 to 20 minutes. Even Mexico. And while burritos are technically not a food you find in Mexico itself, San Diego has taken the concept to blissful culinary heights. You can't go hardly 100 yards here without running into a little taco shop that will be 10 times better than whatever options you have in your town. If Mexican isn't your thing, no worries. There are tons of great restaurants in the area, including a barbecue place 3 blocks away that rivals anything I've tried in Texas. And adjacent to it is one of over 150 craft breweries in San Diego. If you love beer, we gotcha. The West Coast IPA style is a specialty here, but we've got brewers doing all kinds of beers, and several have tasting rooms in walking distance. Did I mention that accommodations are available? So head on over to rarefiedrecording.com and reach out for a quote today. That's RAREFIED recording.com.
And now back to the episode.
And then drums, of course, they need their attention. The condition of the shells, for instance. The bearing edge where the drum head sits. Something to check. There can be divots in there. There can be things that are weird about it so that the head doesn't sit flat. And they can make it hard to tune.
Mm-hmm.
The lugs, they might need attention. Sometimes they start slipping.
Mm-hmm.
And they might need to be oiled up or something like that. And other vibrations and rattles,
mm-hmm.
When you hit a drum. Like it's some hardware rattling around on you.
Yeah.
You want to make sure that's all taken care of. Sometimes you got to put a piece of tape on something. That happens.
Yep.
Especially when you take off the front head of a kick drum, if that's like what you're going for. And then there's all these like things kind of that used to have something inside of them, like are just hanging loose. a lot of times you got to tape those.
Yeah, gaffer's tape can be your friend.
Yeah.
Or duct tape, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah. Now, like with strings, we were talking about like whether they should be brand new or not is kind of variable. With drum heads, I think most people agree you want a new head on there, ideally.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it's slightly played, before you arrive, but
yeah, especially
Fresh.
toms.
yeah, fresh heads are usually the way to go, and they're going to get played during the sessions. They're going to kind of change a bit as you go along.
Mm-hmm.
You can bring some extras if you're being really careful about it and change them even during the session, I suppose. But yeah, that could get expensive.
Yes.
But yeah, usually you want new heads on there. And the choice of heads, I mean, this is also a whole other topic, whole other podcast,
Yeah.
which I don't know enough about to talk to.
Yeah.
If you don't know much about that kind of thing, like working with a drum tech or someone who's knowledgeable can help, I think. Picking like what kind of head. There's different plies. There's different ones that have like oil in them, and there's
Coated or
coated,
not. Yeah.
uncoated, yeah. All these things, and they all sound different.
Mm-hmm.
So it might be a thing. The discussion with your producer, your engineer, or a drum tech that
Mm-hmm.
helping you out with that.
Yeah. And then they have those rings, the gummy stuff that you put on the snare to
Yeah,
deaden the snare.
right. You can expect that day of. We'll talk about that, I think, maybe on next episode. What does it look like in the tracking session? And when you get into drums, a lot of times it's like experimenting with dampening the drums with different gels and
Right.
even your wallet or
Yeah.
tea towels and these kind of things.
I think the one thing that I would say you can get away with not changing the heads would be the kick and the snare, but it also depends on the type of playing you're doing. If you're a hard hitter, then you might want to change the snare.
Yeah, I've seen some snares that look pretty beat up.
Yeah, but if you're pretty easy on your snare and it's it's probably okay, but you should always have a replacement in case something happens, or the producer or engineer says, no, let's put a new one on.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe have a backup for the kick. It's very unlikely that your kick is going to break.
Yeah.
I've seen it break, so you might want to have an extra just so you don't have to kill 2 hours of running to the store to get one.
Right. Yeah, backup heads would probably be smart. Yeah, the kicks tend to hold up mostly, especially if you use one of those little, what are they called, flam slams or something like that. Some people use those.
Oh, the
changes the
pad.
sound, a little pad that you
Right.
put on the head, and that's like actually changes the sound too, though. So bottom heads, of course, don't get hit much, so
Yeah.
they're usually in good shape. But it's another thing to think about. Sometimes you don't want them, or the resonant head on a kick drum. That's like a thing with the engineer. Maybe sometimes they want to take that off. And like for toms, like was it this like a 70s thing to take off the bottom heads?
Yeah, it wouldn't. Yeah, and you'd mic from underneath as well.
Yeah,
Both sides sometimes, but
right. Yeah, I mean, miking top and bottom of toms is a thing, with or without the resonant head. Yeah, you might want to think about that. And the kick drum, like I said, is the resonant head staying on? If it's staying on, should it have a hole in it or should it be solid? It depends on the style of music and what you're going for. I know a lot of the jazz guys kind of keep it solid.
yeah, I have a drummer friend who usually has a few heads he brings, but he always brings a kick drum head that has the hole and one that doesn't. So you have the option of
Yeah, they're very different sounds.
yeah. So if you want to put the mic inside the kick, you need the hole.
Yeah. Yeah, so usually that's needed when you're going for a lot of attack on the kick drum and you're really hearing that beater. If you don't have the hole, then your only other option is kind of miking from the other side of the drum where the kick pedal actually is, which I've had mixed results doing that.
Yeah.
Sometimes it makes the snare sound really weird, or it could be picking up a lot of squeak from your pedal, which is another thing you should make sure.
Yeah.
That you don't have a squeaky pedal.
The hardware, yeah.
Yeah. And then, snare drums, like we were saying, the heads hold up a little better usually, but you might want to have a new one or one ready to go. And the tuning of it is very key. And the thing about tuning drums is you can tune them at home or whatever your practice space is, but you can expect that you're going to need to tune them again or tweak them in the studio because it's a new space. The way the drum sound, it interacts with the room, really.
Yep. The humidity and
Yes, the temperature, the humidity, all that stuff. Best if you can get your drums in the studio early in the day and let them sit, you know. If you can bring them in the night before or something, all the better.
Yeah. And I always encourage drummers to bring more snares if they have more than one snare.
Right.
It's something that's not really done much anymore. And I get it because you don't always have the luxury of a lot of time. But, sometimes a different snare on a certain song will make the song better. And
totally.
In the range that the song is, or, if you want a deep snare for a ballad, you have that option.
Totally. Yeah. Snare options are great. And the tuning of the snare, tuning it real low or tight, that stuff makes a huge difference.
Yep.
I'm liking this new product, the Dial-A-Tune or something like that. You seen it? It's a snare drum with a really simple tuning mechanism.
Oh, wow.
For top and bottom heads where you just turn this dial.
Yeah. Oh, that's great.
I haven't used one, but I've seen them. So it's like really easy to just change because it changes the tension of all the lugs at the same time.
Oh, man, that's fantastic.
Yeah. Right. So you can really quickly like try it like looser and on both top and bottom separately.
That's cool.
Yeah. But yeah, drum tuning is such an art.
Yep.
If you're not good at it, the best money you could spend is hiring a drum tech.
Yeah, even if it's for a couple hours.
Yeah. Yeah, I got a guy who'll come in for an hour for pretty cheap.
That's great.
He's good. He's fast. He's done it so much.
Yeah.
And he'll make your drums sound so much better.
That's great. The other thing is cymbals. Sometimes I'm it's nice to have choices, and I know cymbals are expensive, but if you have other ride cymbals or different crash, bring them. You know?
And while we're talking about making sure instruments are in good shape, are there cracks in the cymbals? You know what I mean? Are the cymbals okay? Sometimes you have one that's purposefully cracked, and that's the sound. But yeah, totally. Having some options on the cymbals is nice. Yeah, bring that along.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes the tuning gets specific into like tuning the toms into notes, or the kick drum possibly into notes that fit the song.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something that you have to think about, and it's more tricky because you actually have to tune the drum to a note, which you don't think about usually.
Yeah.
But they do have like a resonance that is a note or is a frequency.
Yeah.
So that might be something that you get into with your engineer or producer, possibly. So when you do those fills, they sound consonant with the song instead of like, why does that sound weird? I don't know. That's because the tom is like out of key with the
song.
Yeah.
And sometimes if you have, depending how the mixer works, but you have notes ringing from the toms through the song when they're not being played. There's this that's ringing off the tom. And if it's many times I've had to clean that stuff up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, obviously you can gate that stuff out as a mixer, but yeah, okay. So that's drum stuff. Keyboards, not as much to talk about probably, but there are things. I mean, you have some sort of a output jack. Those things can get finicky sometimes. Bad output jack, that can ruin your day. Make sure that that is working correctly. You might need to do some calibration stuff on your keyboard, like analog keyboards. I don't know, they need tuning.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, you could have all kinds of potentially switches and pots that are also dirty that need to be cleaned up. There's a product called Deoxit that's great for that kind of stuff. Usually it's a little spray can of chemically stuff that you spray into the potentiometer and you work it back and forth, and or the output jacks, input jacks, whatever.
Yeah,
work the jack back and forth after spraying that stuff, and
sliders, whatever.
Yeah. If you got sliders, they have another product they make. It's called Fader Lube that will make those things work much nicer.
That's great.
If they're sticking.
Yeah.
Just make sure it's okay for your instrument, because sometimes I guess it maybe could cause harm. So you just want to be a little careful there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Then you got other kinds of keyboards, Fender Rhodes, Wurlitzers, electromechanical keyboards. They're tricky to tune. You'll want to make sure that you figure that out ahead of time. Especially a Wurlitzer, where like I guess the tuning involves like dripping solder or removing solder from some tines or something.
Wow,
it's really intense. The Rhodes I think are easier.
Or if you're going to a place,
yes,
make sure that they have it tuned, which you might be charged for. So just be aware of
right. If you're using a piano there or a Rhodes or whatever, it's good practice. Check ahead of time. How is that instrument doing? Does it need to be tuned? If you're relying on it, you'd want to make sure.
You could even go and check it out, I'm sure.
Yeah. If worst case, maybe you go check it out when, off hours, real quick. Just make sure it's up to your standards, you know. But yeah, you might have to pay for some of that. I tune my piano at least every 6 months, but if someone like comes in and it had just been tuned, but they insist that they want it tuned, that's something that I would ask them to pay for if it had been tuned recently, you know. Oh yeah, check for stuck notes, stuck keys.
Yeah.
You know, that kind of stuff can really suck.
Yeah. Or at least know where they are so you can bypass them. Play around.
Yes. So yeah, that's kind of the keyboard stuff. Now, vocalists, you don't get off the hook either.
That's right.
You have an instrument. It's your vocal cords and your throat. And you want to keep those things in good condition. Baby that throat. Avoid smoking and drinking if you can, unless you're going for the real raspy sound, and that's part of it.
Yeah.
But otherwise, you want to keep your vocal cords real moist and healthy, and
at least for a week.
Yeah, exactly. You can give it up just for a little bit.
Yeah.
Keeping hydrated, water, tea, honey, all those things.
Yeah, bring that stuff to the studio if you need to, you know.
Yeah, there's a tea I like called Throat Coat that sometimes is good. It really smooths your vocal cords.
Stay away from milk.
Yeah. Yeah, don't have big pizza at lunchtime. You want to do whatever you can, you know, to keep your vocal cords sounding good.
Yeah.
Other instruments, of course, there's all sorts of other things, and all these things apply. String players might need rosin, you know, violins and all that kind of stuff. Horn and wind players might need to make sure their stuff's oiled up, all their moving parts, their valves and blah, blah, blah. What was it? Reeds, the clarinets and stuff like that use reeds.
Yeah, right.
You know, reeds can get out of shape. You might need a new reed. There's so many possible instruments we could talk about, but that's kind of the idea, though, is just generally speaking, making sure your instrument is in good shape so you don't have any surprises when you get to the studio. It's going to, you know, mess you up.
Yeah.
Make stuff sound not as good as it could, or really stop you in your tracks sometimes. Completely shut you down sometimes.
Yeah.
Other thing we kind of touched on, gathering your materials that you're going to need while you're there. So all the accessory stuff, we kind of mentioned tuners, extra strings, extra drum heads, batteries.
Oh, yeah.
You know, power supplies for all your things you're using.
Yeah, right.
Cases, stands, rosins, oils, like I just mentioned.
Guitar
picks.
Sticks for drums.
Sticks, brushes.
Yeah.
Mallets.
Yeah.
You know, all these little things that you could easily leave at home.
Drum key.
Yes, drum key.
I'm just putting more emphasis on the simple things that are forgotten.
Yes, so easily forgotten because they're small and they're not like the main thing you need. But
drum key is very...
Drum key.
Oh, man.
I have some in my studio, of course.
Yeah.
But, you know, sometimes they disappear. So
yeah,
better to have one with you. Scratch tracks, if you're bringing them, if you're playing along to scratch tracks, don't forget to bring those or send them as an email, you know, for download or MP3, whatever, attached to an email. Even if you emailed them, it might be good to bring a memory stick or a hard drive with them on there just in case.
Yeah.
What about lyrics? If you do need to print out the lyrics, you know, if you haven't memorized them, or if other people in the band need them or something, the producer needs them, print out those lyrics, bring them along. The studio may or may not have a printer. Think about that. You might need sheet music.
Yeah.
If you haven't, you know, if you have a need for that, chord charts, bringing that stuff along, and music stands, possibly instrument stands to put your instrument on, possibly.
Yeah, those are all good things to have.
And like we said, knowing the tempos and the key of your song. So, you know, because if there is going to be auto tune or something involved, it's much better if you know the key is. Now they have this thing called auto key or something where it can figure it out, but it's I've used it a little bit, and it starts giving you like multiple keys. That's great. So it's like, it's not perfect. Better if you know what the key of your song is and the tempo. And memory sticks I mentioned about, you know, for your scratch tracks, but also hard drives or memory sticks for getting backups of your files or whatever. You know, that's good to bring along.
Yeah. Yeah, you want to take it with you when you finish.
Yeah.
Maybe not at the end of the first night of 3, but the end of the 3 days or whatever you're booked for.
Yeah, because, you know, engineers and studios do their best to preserve your data, but nothing's perfect, right?
Yeah.
Shit happens. And if you have a copy, it's good.
And a lot of studios say, you know, you have a week and we're erasing your stuff. So
that too. Yeah.
when you take it home, make sure it works. Make sure it's there.
Right. Double check that all the data's there, even if you can't open it because it's Pro Tools and you don't have it or whatever, but you see that the files are there and it's not complaining about corruption or something like that. So yeah, it's kind of up to you in a way to back up that stuff. You know, you might need to get to it later too, you know, like even at the end of a project, this is another thing that it's good to do is just get everything.
Yeah.
Even if you have no way to open it yourself, like you might need to open it later with another engineer, another studio.
Yeah, totally.
To do something for a TV show because a TV show picked up your song and they want an alternate version without the lyrics or without the vocals or something. You know what I mean? It's good to have all that stuff.
Yeah.
And then besides that, you can't overlook food and drink. You got the power supplies for your equipment, but what about the power supply for yourself?
Yeah, that's right.
You know, it's good to have snacks around so you never get hangry.
Yeah. Coffee.
Yeah. Your caffeine. Yeah. If you need that, make sure you have that. You can, of course, you can get anything delivered now, which is great.
Yeah.
But it's, you know, then you're taking time to like figure out what you want and doing that and worrying about that. And if you had it all ready to go, you're saving yourself time, saving yourself money probably. And then there comes like maybe you need a bigger meal possibly, at some point, having a plan for that.
Yeah.
Maybe someone goes out and grabs stuff or you do the order thing or, just think about what you're going to eat. Like we said, don't want to have a big pizza if you're the vocalist. Don't want to have a bunch of cheese, milk. That's probably not going to be great.
It might be a good idea to, while you're doing your rehearsals and you're taking a break during that, is just sort of outline how it's going to go, Okay, we're going to do one song, take a break, do the second song, then we're going to have lunch or dinner or whatever, depending on how much time you're taking on each song. And you have a time you're going to do overdubs, you're going to do it after the song's tracked, or you're going to edit, or, kind of just
Right.
at least have an idea of how you want the session to go. So you're not like kind of all of a sudden at the end of your 3 days or whatever you have booked and then realize, oh, we haven't done vocals. We need to do backgrounds, which is fine. You'll just have to book some more time, but
yeah, totally.
Get as much done as you can. And if you're well rehearsed, you should be able to fly through it pretty quick.
Yeah, a plan like that would be great. The next episode, I think we'll talk about what the tracking session kind of looks like in the more detail of that, what to expect.
Cool.
Because, there's a lot of things that go on from the moment you walk in the door to the end of the day, or the end of the week or whatever it is. But yeah, so there's the food thing and double checking logistics. So, as the day approaches, make sure, like kind of what we were just talking about, like that everyone knows what the plan is. Everyone knows where to go, when to show up. Everyone in the band. I've had that happen where day of, like, I'm getting texts like, what's the address of the studio? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, that's fine. But,
another good thing to have is if you have a buddy that really is into the band or into your, just a good friend who wants to come and help. It's always good to have an extra hand as long as they're not somebody who's going to be in the way.
Right.
If they're helping you set up the drums or helping you set up your guitar, or carry things back and forth.
Yeah.
They don't even have to be there all day. They can just be there to start and come hang out at night or...
Yeah. Getting the food, run, snack run, whatever.
Totally.
Yeah. All that stuff. But yeah, knowing when to show up, where to show up. Sometimes people come early to the studio, which they probably think that's really great. They're there early, but honestly, as an engineer and studio owner, it's not cool to be super early. A little tiny bit early is okay maybe, but like, first of all, like you booked a certain time, and so like if you come early, you're kind of like getting free time. It's not really fair. Also, like, the engineer might be finishing up something from the last session, cleaning up the studio, prepping for your session, things like that, and then you're just like suddenly a distraction.
Yeah.
So if you do want to show up early because you're nervous or whatever, like, okay, maybe do that, but like get your stuff out of your car and like bring it close to the studio or something like that, and like don't like bug the studio or engineer too early. Yeah,
be ready to just sit.
Yeah, you're like got all your stuff ready to go, and you're ready to walk in the door at the time. That's more appropriate to me than like showing up early and being like, I'm gonna bring my stuff in.
Yeah,
And it's like, well, dude, you didn't even pay for that time.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
As an engineer, one of the things that I always try to do, but doesn't usually happen because, everybody's excited. This is a big deal. And I try to stagger the guys coming in. Like, I want the drummer first.
Yeah.
Because I'm going to be working on drums for an hour at least. And then the bass player can show up like an hour later. And then the guitar players maybe another half hour later. And then the rest of the crew can come in, because the drums are going to take a lot of time.
Yes.
And if the bass player and the guitar player are all asking me questions, where do I plug this in? Where's the blah, 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 blah.
Right.
It's so distracting and it just makes my life worse.
Yeah.
I need to focus on the drums.
Yeah.
Make sure it's working. There's a lot to do with drums.
It's better for the band mates too, I feel like. Because there's a lot of sitting around at the beginning, usually working on the drums at first.
Yeah.
And so the guitar players, the bass player, there's a lot of like twiddling their thumbs. Like, when's it going to be my turn?
Mm-hmm.
Everybody just come later.
Yeah, if you come later, you're going to get your time. You're going to get much more focused time.
Yeah.
Which is really great. But I get it.
Yeah.
Everybody's excited.
Everyone's excited, but just know that like the beginning of the session is a lot of setup and most of it's drums if you're doing drums.
Yeah. Or everybody's here and you go in the control room to start EQing and playing with the drums to make them sound better. Everybody's like talking. There's like 3 conversations going on in the control room.
It makes it impossible for the engineer to do their job because they need their ears on the material, not on your conversation.
Yeah.
Showing up staggered is a cool idea. Showing up way late is a bad idea, obviously.
Yeah.
The studio is not necessarily going to extend you extra time. They may have another session after you. They may not be able to give you time after your agreed upon end time. And if they did, you're probably paying for it.
Yeah.
So don't be late either. And then I would say the communication with your engineer about what you're doing for the day, like just make sure that you guys are on the same page, before the session, that there is a clear agenda for the session. Like we were talking about, this kind of plan, that's exactly right. You really want to make sure that that's clear, especially with the engineer who you're going to be working with. So they have in their mind what they're going to do, or they've prepped for it,
Yep.
Otherwise you might catch them off guard and they'll be like, oh, you want to do Hammond organ today? Oh, I didn't know that,
Yeah. That's a setup you got to do,
Yeah. So that kind of stuff, just make sure, hopefully you've talked about that stuff, but it's not bad to double check.
Yeah.
On that kind of thing.
Or even like if you're going to do fixes after the take, if you're going to do them right after the take, or you're going to do them the next day and just focus on tracking.
Right.
It's good to know. I mean, it's easy to just jump into doing overdubs, but at the same time, it's just stuff people can plan for. And I think it makes things smoother and there's no surprises.
Totally. And then the last thing would be understanding, what you owe money-wise to the studio, when you owe it, what kind of methods of payment do they accept? So you're not caught off guard at the end of the session with the studio owner or engineer being like, okay, time to settle up. And you're like, oh, wait, I got to pay now? Oh, I don't have, and I'm not prepared for that. That's not cool.
Yeah.
A lot of times I don't deliver any files until I get paid, So if you're like hoping to really be moving this train along and then suddenly like you're stalled out because you didn't have the money, like, well, that's kind of your fault.
Yeah. Yeah. That's funny because a lot of times you don't get thank yous or you do get thank yous. But for me, after doing this for so many years, is being paid without having to ask for it is a huge thank you.
Yeah.
And it's really not a thank you because you earned it.
Yeah.
But it means so much because we usually have to ask for the payment.
Right.
And it's my favorite clients are the ones that pay me sometimes before I even start to work, or I send them the mix and they pay me right away.
Right.
I don't have to ask.
Yeah.
It makes me feel so good.
Yeah. That's respect,
Yeah.
for the fact that this person's done this work for you,
And saying, of course, that you appreciate the work and thank you for your day. And it was great.
It never hurts to butter up your engineer a little bit. If you felt like they did a good job, let them know.
Or your hired musicians,
yes,
if you have those.
If you have session musicians, all that stuff's just gonna, there's a relationship here that we have with the artist and the artist has with us. And it's our job too, to do that as well, and to say that you did great, love the song, and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, I do have a checklist in the ebook at preppingforthestudio.com, which is kind of boils down into one page session preparation checklist. Are the songs ready to record? Do you have the structure, the arrangement, the tempo, the lyric sheet, music charts? Have you practiced enough? Does everyone know their parts? If you're using a click, is everyone comfortable playing to one? Have you memorized lyrics, or are you bringing a copy? Are your instruments and gear ready? Guitars recently set up intonated, new strings on if desired. Don't forget an extra pack. Any technical issues, buzzes, hums, rattles, new heads for drums. Are you comfortable tuning drums, or you need help? Any need to rent an instrument or hire a session player? Have singers been taking care of their vocal cords? Have you discussed sonics with your engineer? Have you provided references? Is there a clear sonic vision you can communicate? Do you have a day of game plan? Which musicians are recording initial basic tracks versus overdubbing? Which songs will you record first, second, etc.? Do you have a plan for snacks, drinks, meals? Does everyone know where and when to arrive? Does anyone need to leave early? And have you accounted for that? Do you have a hard drive or USB stick to bring your files? Are your financials in order? Do you have a budget for the various stages of the project? Recording, mixing, mastering, etc. Are all band members prepared to pay their share? How are you paying? Cash, check, credit card, etc. So that's a little checklist
That's great.
I made that covers, highlights of what we've been talking about here for getting ready for your session.
That's fantastic. I love the part, are you leaving early?
Yes.
I can't tell you how many times I'm like ready to dig in to make a part better. And the guy goes, oh, I got to go. We're washing the dog at 5. Okay.
Yeah, totally. Sometimes people have a job they got to get to. It's just one member of the band, but like that dictates the schedule of the day.
Mm-hmm.
You got to get that person's stuff done before they have to leave.
Yep.
So good to know all those things. And you can go to preppingforthestudio.com to download the ebook and find that checklist. I also have it at rarefiedrecording.com in my link section. Rarefied Recording is where we're doing this podcast from, my studio in San Diego. So rarefiedrecording.com, in the link section, there's this checklist as well as the ebook. That's it for today's episode, Brian.
Cool. Wow. That's great.
Yeah.
Love it.
Yeah. So next time I know we're going to be talking about what the tracking session kind of looks like, in the nitty gritty.
That'll be
the
fun.
setup and all the stuff the engineer is doing. What are they doing? What are they doing in there?
Exactly. You know what all those knobs do?
Oh yeah, that's the ultimate question.
Yeah.
You know what every single knob does here? Yes. It's not as complicated as you think, but you do know. Yeah. Anyways. So thanks guys. Thanks for listening. Yeah. Subscribe, please, to the podcast. Leave us comments. Send us emails. We'll be happy to get back to you.
That's our show for today, folks. Thanks so much for listening to Prepping for the Studio. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave us a 5-star review on whatever platform you listen to your podcast from. And don't forget to subscribe and tell your friends. Episode info and my ebook, A Musician's Guide to the Recording Studio, are available at preppingforthestudio.com. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out there. Prepping for the Studio was recorded and edited at Rarefied Recording by me, Roy Silverstein. Theme music written by myself and Ariel Levine, performed and recorded by Ariel Levine. Many thanks to my co-host Brian Schubel and you. Best of luck to you and your musical endeavors. And remember, as Alexander Graham Bell once said, before anything else, preparation is the key to success. We'll see you next time.